Everyone's favorite character from the original, Hornet, is getting her very own game in the form of Hollow Knight Silksong. But what does this new game from Studio Cherry entail, and what changes does Hornet bring to the table? Join us as we scrape together what's new and what remains the same in Hollow Knight Silksong. Hollow Knight is a game that many consider to be the epitome of indie games, and to say that it left its mark on the industry would be a massive understatement. With beautiful hand-drawn 2D art, crunchy combat, and great movement mechanics, along with an amazing soundtrack, this game had all the ingredients to come together to create a masterpiece for the ages. To think that this game actually came out of a Kickstarter campaign is pretty baffling, especially these days. But Team Cherry did actually end up backing out of one of their promises with the campaign, and that was to have another protagonist in the form of an expansion pack. This was because it proved to be too much work and they ended up canceling it. Luckily, this was good fortune for us players, because they didn't let the remnants of that expansion go to waste. The bits and bobs got turned into a completely new sequel, and that is from where Hollow Knight Silksong came to life. It's the same team, same art direction, same composer, and the same love for the genre. If anything, everything we've seen so far points to a game that is authentic to the source material to a fault. Not that we're complaining. But with updates about the game so far spread out, it's difficult to see if the developers really can catch lightning in a bottle twice. So the question is, would Silksong be able to replicate that same magic as the first game? Let us think about that from what we know so far. Those of you who have already played Hollow Knight will no doubt remember Hornet. First introduced as a foe, she became the Knight's ally partway through the game. She was also the first major enemy that players encountered, and from the very start, it was pretty apparent that she didn't really mean us harm. All she wanted to do was to warn us of what would become of anyone who descends into the underground city, and depending on how you played the original, she may or may not have played a pretty big role at the end as well. In any case, she acted as the deuteragonist in the first game, so it's only natural that she now gets her very own story. Being the princess/protector of Hollow Nest, Hornet is a more interesting protagonist to play as, with much more character hiding behind that mask. In the start of Silksong, however, she finds herself kidnapped and ends up in the kingdom of Faraloom, a land said to be haunted by Silk and Song. Yes, the Silksong is indeed real, but this is not to be confused with the infection in Hollow Nest. It's a bit different, at least according to the information currently available. But I bet the real question on your mind right now is, how does this new setting fare in comparison to Hollow Nest? After all, the journey is just as important as the destination, so to answer it simply, it looks breathtaking. In contrast to its prequel, Silksong will throw players at the very bottom of Faraloom. You will then make your way up towards the Citadel and slowly answer all of your questions along the way. Why was Hornet kidnapped in the first place? What really infects this kingdom? All the answers lie at the top of the Shining Fortress. The Citadel in Faraloom is said to be a shining palace, pretty much the opposite to the dark abyss of Hollow Nest. This, along with the Ascension, probably signifies what the game is really about. The Knight's journey into the abyss ultimately led him to meet his demise, one way or the other. Yes, he didn't actually die, but he did end up becoming the new vessel for the Ultimate Radiance, which we can't really consider to be a great ending for our knight. But for Hollow Nest as a whole, by all means, sure. But what does this signify for Faraloom and Hornet? Would the story and how it concludes be in stark contrast to the original? Perhaps be a bit more uplifting? While we can't be 100% sure on this by any means, it does imply a great premise for players to experience firsthand. Now, this difference is also pretty apparent in the appearance of the few areas we have seen so far. While they look absolutely amazing, they have a pretty different color palette to the original. The lighting and the backgrounds ooze a bit more of a lively aura in comparison to the almost always blue hue of the original. This is done to simply set the mood, so to speak. And not to get sidetracked, but a lot of media uses a simple trick to let the consumers know what they're about to experience. So, again, it's different, but in a good way. The areas themselves range from some beautiful mines and forest-like regions to industrial sections full of machinery. It's all reminiscent of the song part of the name. Lots of enemies and area designs have a hint of some musical instrument in them, while Silk serves more as a replacement for Soul from the first Hollow Knight, but more on that later. The last stag is now replaced with the Bell Beast, so fast travel is also making a return, but we might have to free and then defeat him first though, so he's probably not as nice a guy as the old stag was. Another difference that may or may not be that important is that Hornet is actually not a mute protagonist. She does indeed speak, in a bug language, yes, but she speaks nonetheless and voices her opinions pretty sternly. So with that, I guess we've talked enough about the world, so let's move on to Hornet and how she fares in comparison to the Knight. As was pretty much expected, Hornet moves much differently when compared to the Knight. She's much more acrobatic and can jump higher as well, but that might just be a result of her being much bigger than her smaller counterpart. Aside from that, she might have a bit more weight to her movement as well. You can also now climb ledges and move through areas much faster due to agility being the core of her movement, so needless to say, general traversal will be a breath of fresh air to say the least. As previously mentioned, Silk is the new souls, so the soul totems are now replaced with spindles of silk. So instead of using soul to recharge, you'll be using silk to do exactly that. One major difference coming from the Knight is that Hornet can actually heal pretty quickly and the charge time is really small. This, along with her being able to also heal mid-air, is pretty cool to say the least, while also being a step down in terms of difficulty. Silk also plays into the gameplay in the sense that it can be used to grapple around the environment, giving Hornet a wide range of mobility. It's a little different from the Knight's charged infinite dash, which only worked in one direction, but this change suits Hornet really well. There's also a parry dash that players could take advantage of, also dependent on your silk meter, but it gives you another option during battles, which are always nice to have. Needless to say, you can expect the combat to be just as involved as before. The charms are now replaced with tools, which can be crafted by yourself or bought from the Forge Daughter, who is the new smith. One thing to note here is that tools can be bought or crafted using the new currency called rosaries, but some of them, like the pin projectiles, will have to be replenished using a completely new currency system called shell shards. The same currency would also be used to repair the tools as they wear down with use. While you will lose all the rosaries when you die, your shell shards will pass over, so no need to worry about losing both at death's door. As there are a wide variety of tools with various effects, you can equip a mix of your choice with the help of crests. A new system made just for equipping tools, these basically allow you to alter your playstyle however you want. You could equip more buff items per se, or add throwables or damage focus tools. One thing to note here is that different items will have different categories, and different crests would only allow a specific number of each at the same time, so to get better configurations, you will need better crests. It's complicated, I know, but it will make more sense when you play the game yourself. There's also going to be a new journal that will now let you keep track of all your quests. This is a brand new addition as there was no such thing in the original game, and it works exactly how you expect it to. Hornet jots down all the going-ons in the world, and you can use it to catalog all of your adventures without getting lost. And finally, there's also a new rival character of sorts named Lace that you will encounter pretty early on, and she will be a recurring enemy in the game, much like how Hornet was to the Knight. Her attack pattern and animations are pretty elegant looking as well, kind of like the Bolognese sword fighting style. So a lot of the original themes are making a return for this new entry as well. So what we know so far is that Silksong takes what made Hollow Knight so great and adds its own sprinkle on top to tip its hat to the original while still being fresh and new. While we did hope that there was a bit more news on the game rather than just releasing sometime this year, from what we've seen so far, Silksong is really shaping up to be yet another beautifully crafted experience from Studio Cherry. It's going to be released on virtually all major platforms at the same time, so don't worry about being late to the party or being left out.